everyone, and welcome back to What a Barb, a Polin podcast. I'm Obs, and this week I'm joined again by Lecky, Beans and Veg as we continue plowing through our Polin rewatch of Season 2. First of all, how are you all doing? Beans, you've had a night.
I have had a night. I went to a club with my friends last night. It was so much fun. I went home at 3 a.m. and I got myself a 10-piece chicken McNugget with some fries. And I was like, I should eat some sort of fiber. So I ate 2 clementines. And I was so glad that I went out because originally I didn't want to because I was sad. But then a bunch of people canceled on my friend. And so I was like, I have to go out. And it was a great old night. So that's my update and I'm exhausted.
Lecky, you've been apple picking.
Yeah, we go every year. It's my favorite. Yesterday was so busy, though. And just a little note from the editor. Our episode today is a bit long, so we had to make some cuts to our intro. I wouldn't have said anything about this except for the utter injustice, the crime that was committed against me by Obs. I will just give you a little glimpse here of what you missed. I haven't been apple picking. I didn't go picking, but I didn't go apple picking.
Lecky, you've been apple picking.
Yeah, we go every year. It's my favorite. Yesterday was... For the record, I did not go apple picking, and I do not appreciate the gross misrepresentation of my character. However, I do love apples and apple season, but thank you, Obs, for this lovely piece of editing. So yeah, I didn't get as many apples as I wanted, but I got some, and some pie, and it was fun, if a bit chaotic.
Oh my god, that seems like such a main character thing.
That's the most adorable update. Veg, have you been a main character this week?
No, I have not. So I did a fast park run, so I'm having a great time. It was nice.
Ooh. What about you, Obs? How are you doing?
I'm alright. I've just been everywhere. I don't know how this week is even as long as it is. I started the week in Albania, and then I was in Corfu in Greece, and now I'm on a different island.
Yeah.
And I don't really know where I am anymore.
Where exactly in Greece are you, Obs?
I'm just on a nondescript island.
It has nothing to do with Bridgerton.
No, it's just an island.
One that's never been mentioned on the show.
There are a lot of islands in Greece, and I'm on one of them. And it's very nice.
Okay. Before
we get started, Lecky, can you take us through the breaking crumbs of the week? So, Lecky, what have you got for us?
Hello, Barbkin. Our first order of the week, we are here to remind you that there are only a couple of days left to order the t-shirt that Nicola designed to raise funds for Choose Love. Both Golda and Luke Newton shared photos of themselves wearing the t-shirt, which was great. It's always nice to see new glimpses of the cast, and we will be posting the link to buy the shirt in our show notes. Once again, the deadline to pre-order is October 29th. We are not sure if the shirts will be available after that date, but if you happen to listen after October 29th, it's still worth checking out.
And you can still make a donation.
In Season 3 news, an eagle-eyed fan account on Twitter discovered a piece of casting information. At Romp Romance shared that Tom Byrne will be playing an unknown role in Season 3, though they speculated that Tom could be a member of the, quote, Lord Squad. That is the group of lords that consists of Lord Fife, Lord Wilding, and Lord Cutbill, aka a group of lords we suspect may be Colin's friends or peers or perhaps some suitors next season. Also, I just have to say, Lord Squad has now become my new favorite phrase. So full credit to Romp Romance for bringing that joy into my life and for uncovering this piece of casting information.
As ever, we love a new Lord on the scene.
I love the Lord Squad. All in for the Lord Squad.
Come and join the gang. What else is going on, Lek?
We reported last week that Luke has been cast in the role of Thomas in the upcoming animated movie Viana, The Legend of the Golden Hearts. Well, this casting has now been officially confirmed, with the project's director praising Luke for his talent, perfectionism, and dedication. Once again, congratulations to Luke. We look forward to hearing updates on the movie in the coming months. Julia Quinn recently spoke at an event hosted by the University of Washington Libraries. During the event, Julia was asked why the Regency era has become synonymous with romance, to which Julia offered that the Regency era is far enough in the past that we can romanticize parts of it, and that gives the period an almost fairy tale-like quality, while also being recent enough that characters behave in ways that modern audiences can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Bailey was featured on the digital covers of V Magazine and Vanity Fair France. In an interview with the latter, he spoke of his relationship with theater, celebrity, and the importance of LGBTQ representation on screen. Jonathan has also received critical acclaim for his performance in his new show Fellow Travelers, which premiered earlier this week, with one review describing him as exceptional.
Yeah, go catch that.
Everyone's favorite Footman John that is, aka Ollie Higginson, has been announced as a member of the 2023 Orange Tree Theatre Writers Collective, so congratulations to Ollie. Season 3 director Billy Woodruff has directed the music video for Keke Palmer's new song Ungorgeous, if you want to get a sneak peek at his directing style.
Oh, definitely.
In an interview with Digital Spy, Ruby Barker confirmed that she will not be reprising her role as Marina Thompson in future seasons of the show. In the article, Ruby discussed her own journey with mental health and shared how her work with mental health charities such as Wellbeing in the Arts and Mind have become her main focus going forward. And in strike news this week, members of SAG-AFTRA marked the 100th day of the strike. The milestone came as negotiations resumed between SAG and the AMPTP. At the time of recording, the talks are still ongoing, although the chief negotiator for the union, Duncan Crabtree Ireland, told Deadline on Thursday that he was cautiously optimistic, and Deadline has reported today, on Friday, that talks are continuing into the weekend, which is an encouraging sign. Of course, we wish SAG all the best as negotiations continue. Before we get started, let's take a little walk down memory lane, as per usual.
You know I love to.
On the day this episode is released, it will be exactly 1 year since Nicola shared a behind-the-scenes photo of herself and Luke with the caption, "We've been busy." If you were in the fandom at that time, you'll recall how excited we all were to see them both and to get a little crumb from set.
Yes, it was a great day. Do you remember it, Lek?
No, honestly. I just remember the picture.
No, you're ruining this.
I remember the carriage day. I remember being excited.
Great. No, you didn't. You didn't remember that.
Well, I
because
didn't.
Last week we had this
I didn't
conversation.
remember the date. I remembered like the feeling and the emotion.
No, I'm saying,
and that's
do you
the
remember
same
the
for this
experience?
one.
Do you remember the memory of it?
Oh, okay, yeah. If you had asked me, do you remember the experience or the feelings you felt, then I would say, yeah,
Do you
it was a
remember
great
this
day.
happening to you?
Yeah, it was nice to see them. And I remember that Nicola was wearing like a really sweet, I think like floral dress. It was super cute.
I really liked her dress.
Cute little dress.
And as ever, we look forward to the day we hopefully start receiving a few new crumbs. But until that moment, Lecky, shall we get on with our episode? Thanks for that, Lecky. So last week we attended The Wedding That Wasn't, but this week it's ramping up. We're heading straight towards that season finale, and this is a good one. Lecky, this is your fave, isn't it?
Well, I mean, like 202 is my favorite episode of season 2, but 207 has my favorite Polin moments of season 2.
Interesting.
Is this your heart eyes?
Well, I mean, my heart eyes of season 2, I would clarify, because the What a Barb scene is number 1, in my opinion. But yeah, there's just a whole sequence in this episode that's just perfection, and I love it.
It's a good one. It's a good one. Okay, then let's get into it. Lady Veg, can you give us our episode summary?
Dearest gentle listener, this episode, the Bridgertons and Sharmas struggle to deal with the aftermath of Anthony and Edwina's failed wedding and the social shame that comes along with it. Eloise is accused by the Queen of being Lady Whistledown, causing trouble with Theo and leading to Penelope having to make some tough choices to save her friend but protect herself. Cousin Jack Arrington increases the reach of his scheme and ensures Monarch's silence. A party is planned at Bridgerton House, but nobody attends, and while the families share a dance, the joy is ended abruptly by news of Eloise's actions being revealed in Whistledown. Anthony Bridgerton finally stops staring at Kate's face, but moves his attention lower down the body. And Kate is involved in a dramatic and life-threatening fall from a horse.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lady Veg. Busy episode, so Lecky, why don't you kick us off?
So in the opening voiceover, Lady Whistledown declares,
This author may traffic in chatter and speculation, dear reader, but misinformation? Never.
Again, kind of reiterating that Lady Whistledown is truthful.
Just like this podcast, we also traffic in speculation, but maybe unlike Lady Whistledown, we have dabbled in misinformation once or twice. Apologies.
Lady Whistledown goes on to say that the town must not forget that it was
Her Majesty the Queen who placed the young miss on that special stage so that she could make her grand exit.
We've touched on this in the last episode and throughout the season, but now Lady Whistledown is openly blaming Queen Charlotte for the scandal, likely because Penn wasn't able to gather any other gossip at the wedding. And if we revisit her earlier comments about the truth, it suggests that Penn was able to perhaps discern that many of the rumors she heard at the wedding were fabricated and untrue. I really like this because it's all setting up this cat and mouse game between Penn and Queen Charlotte that we'll likely see carried forward into season 3.
Penn has well and truly prodded the Queen too far this time, and we've seen it all season, we've commented on it all season. Penn's increase in arrogance, her challenging the Queen without maybe really fully realising just how irritated and provoked the Queen was getting, and Penn's realisation that misinformation was spreading does show how intelligent she is, and crucially just how much she trusts her own intelligence too. And as you said, Lecky, she's never actually printed a lie. It was one of the first things she ever said way back in that first issue of Lady Whistledown that we discussed during our debut rewatch. And I think she really values her commitment to only telling the truth and to showing up a mirror to society, because she could easily print lies, especially in the position of power that she's now gained within the ton. Whatever she says can kind of go unquestioned, but she still is committed to telling the truth. So I have a question for you. Do you think she will print a lie in season 3? And if she would, then what would push Penn into lying in Lady Whistledown? Would she do it to ruin herself, to protect Colin? Would she get pushed that far, or will she stick stoically to the truth?
I feel like her shtick is that she will present a version of the truth.
She might keep something out of her storytelling.
And be tactical.
Yeah.
I don't think that she's going to ever purposely lie to save somebody. She'll just omit things.
Yeah.
Or publish a different story to distract from one scandal and highlight another.
Yeah, distraction tactics. I don't know. I have a little theory that I'm still building in my head that she's gonna lie and do something to protect Colin, but we will see.
She could expose herself to protect Colin.
This is what I mean. I think she will.
Yeah.
But I don't think she'd expose Whistledown.
Yeah.
You also think she might lie about herself in order to protect Colin.
I think that's what it would be. That's something she's never done.
Right.
In the show, and something she's stuck stoically to, which storytelling-wise means that that's something that she should almost do as a way to go against herself.
Yeah. I mean, maybe she'll post something that's like, Colin Bridgerton is not interested in Penelope Featherington, and like, you know, just like sort of a throwaway statement if people start talking about the two of them more.
Yeah, that's a good point. Or when she starts to worry about her feelings for him.
Yeah.
You know, and trying to like drive more of a wedge between them or something.
Right. Yeah. I think that could potentially be a huge thing. And it's not exactly a lie because that's what she knows. That's her truth thus far.
Because that's the one up that she has on him, isn't it, really? Like,
Yeah.
And I just think she's going to use that somehow to sabotage herself.
Yeah.
But not to worry about Penn sabotaging herself, because she's got other people to sabotage in this episode. So let's get to it.
So it's awkward bath time over at the Danbury residence, and the Sharmas are none too happy about it. But over at the Bridgerton house, Colin is Colining, making witty quips and, dare we say, barbs about Antony's misfortune.
Yeah, we find Colin helping himself to a hearty breakfast of cake and biscuits. Yum. Man after my own heart. And he is truly in his element as he jokes that Antony is still waiting at the altar for Miss Edwina, much to the amusement of Eloise and Benedict. He takes a seat, and in walks the Viscount himself.
And Colin makes another comment here at Antony's expense about bungled nuptials. And I really like that he's had more opportunities this season, I think, especially in like Pall Mall and stuff, to explore the funnier side of Colin's character. And that is the side that I think is going to get on really well with like Penn, Lady Whistledown. Like, that's the Lord Whistledown, that's the What a Barb.
Yeah.
And I like when these little moments are peppered through, and I wish we'd seen more of them, but I think we've got the best to look forward to in season 3.
I really think that this shows that Colin is healing. He not only delivers some of his best lines here, but again displays that kind of lighthearted, teasing side that we saw a lot early on in season 1. So it's more evidence that he's leaving the situation with Marina behind him and also feeling more like himself again.
Yeah, we forget that we lost him for quite a bit there, but we're getting him back.
Outfit-wise, he's lounging at home in baby blue once again, as is Gregory, though Gregory does get a slightly darker blue than Colin, which I find funny.
He's one-upped. I just want to say that as a big fan of the baby blue, I'm soaking up all the time we get with it in the next episodes, because I know our time together is limited, and I'm going to miss him when he's gone. I'm telling you. I've always also been a big fan of how well he suits the decor of the house. I think he looks so... I'm like, when he's sat in the Bridgerton living room, he just perfectly... It's just like a painting, which is even more hilarious to me, because then he goes up to his bedroom, just completely clashes with all the yellow. And he'll just...
Do you think that this is a sign that he's also thinking more about Penelope? Because he's like, Penelope really blends in at the Featherington house. Maybe I need to blend in more at home too.
Yeah, he's like, she really coordinates, doesn't she? But yeah, I'm going to miss my baby blue when he's gone. So.
Maybe he'll wear a baby blue cravat in honor of...
Yeah, I'm sure we'll honour his roots.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here he's chilled out with his family. This is obviously one of his favourite chilling at home outfits. And also, once again, he's chewing throughout the scene. You really have to admire this boy's dedication to the fans who wanted Luke to sort of honour that part of Colin's character. And there's a couple of moments in this episode about it. He really gets into it. So, big fan.
That plate is piled high. It's true commitment to character and storytelling. We love to see it.
Sadly, though, he's still missing his sidekick, the biscuit cushion, who we will meet next episode.
Oh, God, I cannot wait. My favourite character in the whole series is the biscuit cushion, and he's on his way. Colin's eating is rudely interrupted by Violet's insistence that they all go out to Promenade in an attempt to save face. It's a bit late for that, Violet, but you know, an attempt is made, and she gets a less than enthusiastic response from her various offspring, who all groan in complaint. And Eloise makes an excuse to get out of promenading, and it's subtle, but I swear that you can see Colin look at her in a very suspicious way. He just tilts his head ever so slightly as she speaks to Violet. He's watching her.
Yeah, spotted that.
And as Eloise dashes off to go shopping again, she drags along a now familiar lady's maid. So again, we see Eloise's maid in the same cloak we've pointed out before, but what strikes me about this scene is, well, first there's an editing error here. We'll see another error in the promenade scene where we'll see two versions of the same shot, but here, as Queen Charlotte's carriage pulls up in front of the Bridgerton house, you can see Eloise's maid descending the stairs and stepping toward Eloise. It's almost as if she senses trouble before Eloise does, and her decision to move toward that rather than hanging back, I find a bit unusual. I'd also like to note that in the repeated shot that I mentioned, the second one I found most interesting because in that one, Eloise's maid moves toward Eloise only after the queen reveals herself, which is very brave of her.
Yeah.
Lucky, I think you dropped your clown nose on the ground there. I'll just grab it for you. I'm fully with you. I don't think the other two are quite as on board the train heading towards Clown Town, but we are watching.
I can't see her. I don't even really know who she is, but I'm looking for her.
And as much as we'd like to stick around and help Eloise get out of that sticky situation, we first have some very important reputation-saving walking to do in a scene that is affectionately known amongst fans as the Promenade of Shame.
For those who missed Fife Watch, as we catch up with the Sharmas on their promenade, we see Mary greeting Lord Fife, and when she says good day, he responds by quipping, for some of us, kind of a jerky move, but he's not wrong, technically.
Excuse me. Don't call him a jerk.
I mean, it's just...
He's accurate.
Yeah, it's an accurate observation, but it's kind of a jerky observation.
He's aware of the suffering in the world, and he's aware that it isn't a good day for everyone. I think that means he's socially conscious. He's socially aware. He's not living in this blissful bubble thinking that everything is sunshine and roses all the time. Okay. I'm sorry if you have a problem with that.
Also, upon this rewatch, I noticed that he actually, he glances back at them again as he's walking away. He's just, like, very into the gossip, Lord Fife.
Socially aware, I've told you.
Lord Fife and I would get along.
I think all of us would have a great time with Fife. We throw back some martinis, we'd have a grand time. So we have the Charmers and Lady Danbury doing their best on one side, and who's shown up to bat for the Bridgertons? Well, it seems that Violet has managed to drag A, B and C and H out with her, although Greg has somehow got himself out of it. I suppose those Latin conjugations aren't going to conjugate themselves. And if you look closer, you can just about see the Featheringtons walking a little bit further behind the same path as the Bridgertons. If you are having trouble spotting them, then don't worry, because our darling Colin has kindly volunteered to make it very clear for us exactly where the Featheringtons are. Ever the hero, isn't he?
So as the Bridgertons are walking along the path, the Featheringtons appear behind them. What I like about this particular shot is that Colin glances back at Penn as he instinctively senses her presence. He does it twice, but like with Eloise's maid, I'm pretty sure one of them is an error. In one of the shots, though, you can also just make out Penn behind Colin in her little yellow dress, which I love.
Look, he needs to be doubly sure that she's definitely still there.
He's doing that thing where, like, oh my gosh. There was this one time I went to a concert that Tuba Boy went to because it was his favorite band.
Tuba Boy.
Yeah. And I knew he was going to be there, but I, like, kept checking and looking around to see if he was around me.
That's exactly what he's doing.
Exactly.
But Colin's oblivious.
Yep.
He's like, why do I keep looking around?
Yeah, is there a magnet pulling me?
And then at one point, I was, like, up close to the band, and I felt his presence, and I glanced over, and he was looking down at me, and I was like, oh, and, like, freaked out. And that's not exactly the same as Colin, because he's not there yet with Penn, but I can't, like, I was just, like, blushing and shit.
She looks pretty freaked out when he does make eye contact with her, though.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, back to Colin and his friendship/relationship, which he's going to end next week, actually, on the topic of things. Take that second look for what it is. It's a Polin gift bestowed to us by the gods, or by the editing team. Featheringtons head straight on up to the Bridgertons.
And a quick costume check-in. So Colin's obviously still in the outfit he was wearing earlier because they left within the hour. But Penn is in a not too offensive shade of yellow dress with big roses around the midriff, and she's looking very cute. It is a shame they've covered her up with those rosettes. But she's around Colin, so needs must to stop that season 3 from kicking in too soon. But as we know from last episode, that likely won't stop Colin from taking a peek anyway. He likes her cute little bad outfits, and I love that about him.
You know what? He's got an eye for fashion. He's proved it time and time again.
Yeah, and yellow roses are thought to symbolise friendship and joy, and this isn't that much of a joyful scene, necessarily. Definitely not for Cassidy, but she is being a really good friend to the Bridgertons here.
Aww.
And her hair is looser, and it remains so for the rest of the episode, which we love, of course.
Yes.
Portia joyfully digs in at Violet, saying she's surprised to see them out so soon. And I have to give a shout out to Violet, Anthony, and Benedict's faces throughout this entire scene with the Featheringtons, because they really are a picture to behold. And I can't wait to see the faces they'll be pulling next season. What a lovely reminder that thanks to Penn and Colin, these will all be one happy family one day, hey? But we're not there yet, as Portia happily reminds us, digging up from the grave the memory of Colin's broken engagement, saying that she thought they'd never recover after Mr. Bridgerton and Miss Thompson's falling out. Us too, Portia believers, us too. Portia then delights in recalling how Miss Thompson is now Lady Crane, Philip is now Mrs. Finch, and Prudence is engaged. The only person missing from that little lineup is our poor Penn, which tags on from how Portia told Prudence last episode that Penelope had no prospects. She doesn't even make the cut here. And listener, if you're feeling a little uncomfortable at having the mess of Colin's engagement dug up yet again, then you're not alone, because as Portia speaks, we get a true enigma, a mystery. Get this on BuzzFeed Unsolved, because Sherlock Holmes on the case. We need all the manpower we can get, because this look that passes between Penn and Colin has been the subject of much discussion within the fandom. We get the double look as Colin looks at her, the way that Colin shifts, how Penn looks as if she wants to tell him something. It's this supercharged moment where the glances pass between them and no one else notices, and they seem to be having this secret conversation right there in front of everyone. But what do you think is going on?
For me, I think that Penn's reaction comes down to guilt. She's remembering that she was to blame for Marina's scandal coming to light, and I think more than anything is aware of how much she hurt Colin in her effort to save him. And even in 204, he was still obviously hurting and lost. And
he brought it up again then.
And at this point in the season, I think Colin is starting to think of Penn more often and more fondly. And here he is coming to a very similar realization. He's realizing, A, how much the Featheringtons were affected by this scandal with Marina, especially now that the Bridgertons are facing similar backlash, and B, that it bothers him that Penn was hurt by his part in it. And I think this kind of just sets in motion all of the hero Colin antics we see play out over the rest of the season.
Or like unconsciously get back into the good graces of the Featheringtons.
Well, the day he does something consciously will be a shock to us all.
I know.
Yeah, I agree. I see a lot of their history and their shared understanding in the look. And yeah, for Penn, I think as well, she might be sort of remembering when it was her family in the position of shame.
Yeah.
And sort of her and Colin have that shared experience.
Yeah, I think this is really symptomatic of their deepening relationship throughout this whole season. The last few episodes of the season really have that shift that he's starting to think of her more often, but he still can't quite piece it together, and he just looks a little bit uncertain about exactly what he feels. And I also think there's a lot of embarrassment there for Penn in this moment, because her family are out there being the Featheringtons.
Yes.
And she feels really embarrassed that this represents her in a way.
She doesn't like to be perceived like that.
We see that now when Portia flounces off and insists that Penn follows them, but Penn sticks around long enough to tell Violet that they're truly sorry. And obviously Violet knows that's not representative of everyone, but she seems to appreciate Penn's attempt. But let's be real, the Bridgertons have more on their plate than snarky comments from the Featheringtons. But I do have a question for you all. As we've seen from both seasons now, episode 7 is the scandal fallout territory. So are we going to get another big scandal at this point in the season in season 3? As a reminder, the 107 scandal wasn't Daphne and Simon, it was Colin and Marina. So the scandal doesn't have to be the main characters as it is here in season 2. It could come from another sibling, could be Elle, Ben, Fran, maybe even Greg's getting his little chaos on early. So the 6th episode of each season is when the big scandal actually happens, such as Penn exposing Marina, Edwina breaking off the wedding. Then in episode 7, we have the fallout here, and the fallout ends with a big crescendo with an awful moment. So Daphne crying, Marina collapsing, and in this episode we see Kate being seriously injured, leading us to the final episode of the season. They deal with the aftermath of that big crescendo and they work towards a happy ending. So 306, 307, are we expecting scandal territory?
Yeah.
In the question episode, you were saying that you thought something big would happen at the wedding, which might be in 7 or 8. And I said if it's in 208, it's too late for that.
Yeah.
They'll be happy, yeah.
But you're saying the big scandal happens in episode 6.
Yeah, so right at the end of episode 6 is where it traditionally, the very last few moments is where it takes place.
So yeah, that it couldn't be the wedding.
Right. So then it couldn't be a big scandal at the wedding.
Because that
Thank
was
God.
7 and 8.
So yeah, so I'm thinking that it's, somebody else knows that Penn is Lady
But
Whistledown.
the fallout might be at the wedding, so half right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's really confusing me about the timeline is the fact that the carriage scene was filmed in block 3, so it's late, and the carriage scene comes before the proposal, so they're not engaged until they've rocked the carriage, right? And that comes quite late.
I think it would make sense if the end of episode 4 was Colin finding out.
Yeah.
The very beginning of episode 5 is the carriage.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're going to be engaged by the end of episode 5 or episode 6, and they're planning the wedding, and then there's a big twist at the end of episode 6.
Yeah, somebody else knows that she's Lady Whistledown.
Maybe.
Something like that.
Yeah. Or it gets something gets published in Whistledown that is very damaging.
Yeah.
That they then have to go through with the wedding.
It could be also one of the subplot dramas, like you said.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
As we know, Ben is going to be playing a bigger role this season.
Yeah.
And so it's entirely possible if he has connections to Lady Tilly or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think if Ben gets involved in a scandal, it'd be so interesting for him to be set up for his season, because Ben exists kind of almost outside of society in a way. He goes off and has his subplots with different people who aren't really, and I think he likes not being part of the main Ton world.
Yes.
Whereas if he gets drawn into scandal in it,
Yes, but a lot of the people that he hangs out with, like in season 1, that man was still part of the Ton. So he hangs out on the fringes, but he also hangs out with people who are still connected to high society. So it's entirely possible that something he does will become tied back into the Ton or whatever.
he'll get tangled into it.
Yeah, so I think a subplot is highly possible. I think it's probably going to be a combination of a couple of events, and perhaps one of those events is literally Penn reporting, maybe slipping something that Colin told her in confidence, so now Ben is like getting in trouble or something like that.
That's where Penn makes the mistake.
Yeah.
Because we think she's going to make a big mistake. I feel like we have such a good grasp as a fandom and what will happen in the first half of the season. And then the second half, they really could just pull anything.
Yeah.
Yep, that's true.
I mean, it could be high synth with the scandal. Anything's up for grabs. But speaking of scandal, we should probably pop in on Eloise to check that the Queen hasn't, chopped her head off or anything just yet. Lecky, are they still there? Is she still with her head? What's going on?
Yes, thank God. While Queen Charlotte threatens to crush Elle like a serpent if she does not accept her punishment.
Too great.
She still has her head.
She'll just be crushed, but she'll still have her head. That's lovely.
She hasn't yet been crushed. But anyway, Queen Charlotte threatens to crush Elle like a serpent if she does not accept her punishment and admit that she is Lady Whistledown. But she also hints that she does not want Lady Whistledown to stop writing, which is interesting. All along, we've received hints that suggested Queen Charlotte wanted to stop the gossip writer, but here she instead says that she wants Lady Whistledown to use her power to become a strategic ally to the crown. So here's a question for you. Will she make the same offer to Penn in season 3?
Yeah, probably. It'll be different, but I think the Queen wants to use Lady Whistledown as a propaganda tool. And I don't know if Penn would be willing to give up her freedom.
Yeah, because that's all she wants in life is her freedom from other people's control.
Perhaps when she puts Penn into that position and then threatens to expose her, that's when Penn's like, I'm going to do it myself.
I think it would also be interesting if we see some growth from Queen Charlotte, where by season 3, she realizes she doesn't want Lady Whistledown to become like a mouthpiece for the crown, and that she likes that she has her own voice.
Yeah. I wonder if that could be the episode 8 conclusion that she reaches.
Yeah.
Where she lets Penn continue.
Oh my gosh. Wait, what if, because I don't really want Penn to like expose that she's Lady Whistledown to the Ton yet. I want that to continue on into further seasons, because it's especially prominent in Ben's season.
Yeah, and it's just the voiceover of the whole series is Lady Whistledown.
Yeah.
And it's the hook that made Shonda want to adapt the story in the first place.
Right. And so I'm wondering if maybe the Queen threatens to expose her, not because like she actually wants to, but because she wants Penn to write what the Queen wants her to write. And so Penn starts writing. She's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And the Queen gets wind of the fact that she's going to like expose herself and goes to the papers when Penn is there and is like, we're not doing this. Like, you can keep your identity. That would be so fucking cool. She just shows up into the press and is like, I'm the Queen, bitches.
This is a theory that I shared with the others after our questions episode, because I was just spiraling over the whole scandal at the wedding thing. And we were talking about the idea that maybe an issue of Lady Whistledown might be published at the wedding. So
I love this.
I thought it would be interesting if in that issue of Lady Whistledown, Lady Whistledown offered to come forward and have a meeting with the Queen. This is very Disney. I know it's very Disney, but happy endings will happen.
It's a good adaptation of the engagement ball, though, isn't it?
But yeah, I like that idea, and I like that Penn would eventually come forward and meet the Queen on her own terms, kind of.
But I think I said it could be a great moment for both, like, drama and comedy, since, like, we know that they're going to be playing that up. I think it could be, like, a really incredible moment that's, like, this so tense. Penn comes into the room, and the Queen's like, you? What the hell?
Yeah, it's also kind of a power move, Like, if she's like, I will meet with the Queen. If the Queen's been hunting her and has placed this bounty on her head. I think that'd be kind of cool.
And there's just, like, a montage of, like, all of the workers, like, Penn's walking up and everything, and all of the, like, people are like, oh my gosh.
Or she sneaks in. They might sneak her in somehow.
Oh, that's true. That's true. But Penn could be pretty bold about it.
Just, like, a quick theory about the Queen. The Queen doesn't hate Lady Whistledown. She enjoys the rivalry, and she enjoys the distraction from it as well. And I wonder if what will happen is the Queen will get ahead of herself and a bit wrapped up in her enjoyment of the game and offer the reward or the bounty. And then we'll start having, like, slightly doubting it because, oh God, if she comes forward, then all the fun gets taken out of this game that we've had.
Yeah.
And I wonder if someone external is going to be an actual threat to Penn.
Yeah.
And then the Queen will be like, whoa, I'm the only person who can threaten Lady Whistledown. You don't come after my girl. Like, this is between us.
Yeah.
And we'll then swoop in to save Penn from that.
Yeah, I like it.
So what we need to remember about this scene is that the Queen genuinely believes in this moment that Lady Whistledown is Eloise. So this is her genuine reaction. And yeah, sure, we don't know what Lady Whistledown might do in season 3 because Penn could do something that antagonises the Queen, upsets the Queen, pushes her further.
Yeah.
But here at least I think we can get an insight into what a punishment actually would look like.
Yep.
And the Queen doesn't threaten to imprison her or exile her. She says, have you any idea what will happen once I reveal this secret of yours? People will seek their revenge.
Yes.
She's saying that her punishment would be to reveal the secret, but the danger itself doesn't come from the Queen, it comes from the townspeople themselves.
Yes, I agree.
That's what the real threat is. And this actually ties into Colin's fear in the book. He was scared for Penn because he was like, when people find out it's you, they're going to come for you.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think that in season 3, it will be that outside force that's a bigger threat, potentially. It's just that the Queen's bounty will instigate that.
The Queen will do something that inadvertently puts Penn at risk, but the risk isn't the Queen herself. Something else to point out about this scene is that one of the reasons the Queen has narrowed it down to Eloise is because she says that you are so rarely mentioned in those pages.
Yes.
I also hear you have a great distaste for society, just as the writer herself does. And this reminds us that Penn has slipped up by not writing about Eloise much, so we find out that she's been keeping her friend out of the papers, but she's also slipped up by letting Eloise's voice slip into Whistledown.
Yes.
We said it from the very first episode of the season that Penn was making a mistake by writing to impress Elle.
Yeah.
And it also makes me think that Penn gets away with being Whistledown because so few people see that side of her or listen to her.
Yeah.
So the Queen says, this sounds like you, Eloise. Hence why I think it's you. And in all honesty, I think the only person who really has seen all of the sides to Penelope is Colin. I think Penn's kept a lot of herself from Eloise to the point that when Penelope finally does show that biting side to her in 208, that's actually what makes Eloise realise that it's her. And so I suppose you could ask, why doesn't Colin connect the dots earlier that Penn is Whistledown? Because he is the one who's not only heard her say those quips in public, but he's read her personal writing, so he's familiar with her writing style. Is it because he can't reconcile that beautiful, supportive writing and friendship he receives? He can't reconcile that with the sharp pen of Whistledown. And as we saw last year, he was someone who was directly hurt by Whistledown in the past. So does that mean he doesn't read her work anymore, and so Penn can get away with it a little bit more?
Maybe.
Or has he started reading Whistledown again this year, but now that Whistledown has been tainted by the voice of Eloise, which exactly like the Queen means that Colin hears Eloise when he's reading her Whistledown, that only adds to Colin's conviction that it's Eloise. But all that to say, the die is cast and Eloise realises she is absolutely fucked.
Totally fucked.
And we see later on that a very stressed out Eloise is in her bedroom, laid sprawled amongst every copy of Lady Whistledown.
And in walks Penn unannounced, just as she does later on when she walks into the Bridgerton drawing room. And it's so funny, we've mentioned it before, but she just feels so at home in the Bridgerton house. And I have to imagine that Violet has just told the staff, I'll just let her in. And I wonder if this will backfire in season 3 for Violet, if Penn manages to get into the house undistracted and leading to some very saucy premarital moments which Violet was blissfully complicit in creating.
As long as Violet gets her grandchildren, she doesn't care.
The staff doesn't even need to let her in. Penn knows how to sneak in.
True.
So Penn is at first amused when she learns that Eloise has not only collected one but multiple copies of every issue of Lady Whistledown, but her mood rapidly sours when Eloise reveals what has transpired with the Queen. Penn responds by warning Elle to stay as far away from Theo and the printer shop as she can, and somewhat recklessly suggests that Elle can use the next issue of Lady Whistledown to prove her innocence. It's a wonder that Elle, who is probably too worried to notice, didn't catch on here, because how on earth would Penn know that the next issue of Lady Whistledown would save Eloise?
Classic Elle being wrapped up in her own whirlwind of emotions.
The use of mirrors in the scene is also intriguing to me. We've talked before about how mirrors are meant to hint at Penn's dual identity, and here as Penn learns of Eloise's predicament, and as Elle coincidentally picks up an issue of Lady Whistledown, we see Penn fully reflected in the mirror behind Eloise. Visually, it almost seems as though the camera is forcing Penn to confront her alter ego, which we know she compartmentalizes, with her realizing how Lady Whistledown has negatively impacted her friend and that she may have limited options to save her.
Yeah, this is an absolutely gorgeous shot, and I love how the director and the director of photography and all the teams work together, because it's a very visual shot with the telescope. We've mentioned the telescope before, actually, that if you look in previous episodes, the telescope represents Eloise's search for Lady Whistledown, and it's actually been trained the whole season directly across the road at the Featherington household, symbolising where the true answer is, what Eloise is looking for. And here we see it again is looking in the same direction, but as Penn turns away from Eloise, the shot is perfectly lined up as if she is looking through the telescope herself. We'll post it on socials. It's perfectly lined up, and it looks at Penn's own reflection. The true answer is there within the room. But keep an eye on that telescope, because we'll be returning to it later on.
And this really is, I must say, a roller coaster of an episode for Penn. Like, she has some really happy moments that give her hope with Colin, particularly the scene you love, Lecky. But she does have to make some really tricky decisions as well. So it's just, I just noticed here, like, this just up and down for her. And I'm surprised she doesn't cry more than once.
She can never, it's always one of the siblings causing a trouble, isn't it?
This is just Vedge's moment to chip in and just remind us how much Penn suffers. Because it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
Her life isn't great all the
She's
time.
constantly hassled.
Yeah, and she only cries once, which is more than I could say for what I'd be like in this situation.
Oh, she'll be crying more next episode, don't worry.
The good news about Penn is that her eyes are the bluest blue we've ever seen in our lives, so if it all gets a bit much for Penn, I'd advise that she stares at her own reflection in one of the mirrors we've just mentioned and finds calm in those two big blue orbs.
At this point, I think Penn is being pretty reasonable. Eloise has been reckless, and this is exactly what Eloise is like. She makes these big impulsive decisions without really thinking them through, and it really highlights the difference between the two friends. You know, even when Penn doesn't have much time, she still stops to think about her decisions, whereas Eloise acts before fully thinking it through, and, you know, she impulsively going back to the print shop could be completely disastrous. And this is the kind of behaviour that I think has always made Penn very cautious of sharing Lady Whistledown with Eloise, because this energy just incites chaos.
Yeah, she doesn't think about society, sort of, so she just acts like she doesn't think, oh, I'm a lady in society, I can't just do this. She just sort of like, oh, I want to do this, I'll do it.
Like Theo reminds her.
Yeah.
Well, she's also in such a position where her family is so well known and so respected that the Bridgerton kids are able to make mistakes and not have such dire consequences for them. They always recover because of, like, their status within the society. And so Elle benefits from that strongly. So even if she decides to push the boundaries of society, especially for women, she'll get pushback, but she's not going to get nearly as much if it were any other woman in society that doesn't have the same standing.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about that with Colin and his family during our questions episode, that the way the Bridgerton family is, they're a safety net. So we're going to see next episode that Eloise is theoretically ruined. All that really happens is that Anthony makes a snide remark at her. Like, she has a safety of knowing that her family will always be there for her in a way that Penn doesn't really have that knowledge.
Yeah. And she's always financially, like, her family will always be financially stable. So she's still, Eloise still falls back into the care of her family.
Yeah.
She has no idea the amount of power she also has in her position in this. In
the privilege.
Yeah, and the privilege.
Because it's like, you can't get married now because of your actions. First of all, she'd be like, great, that's exactly what I wanted. I didn't want to get married. And she'd be like, great, my family can still financially survive without me marrying, and I'll continue to have the life I wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
But You know, poor Penn really doesn't know what to do now, and she heads over to the one person she can really confide in about her Lady Whistledown woes, our good friend Genevie. After insisting that Penn shouldn't be there, you know, it's dark and she's out alone. Penn, watch what you're doing. The Modiste lets her in, and the two sit together as a very pensive Penelope tries to work through the impossible problem in front of her. Once again, as with Marina last year, she has a messy situation involving someone she loves, and she has limited time to fix it. And I think Penn knows there are difficult choices ahead of her. Her friend's in trouble, she says, and she doesn't know what to do. And this is probably the lowest that Penn's voice goes, if I recall, especially when reminding Jen about the rewards they both reaped when they're talking about their businesses. And she sounds very mature here, very pensive. She's quite collected and in control of the situation, even though she doesn't have much time and there's a lot of pressure on her, which again is that stark contrast to Eloise's energetic panicking. But speaking of panicking, I think it's fair to say that poor Jen is a little bit worried, especially when she finds out the Queen is involved.
Yes, so Penn ruefully admits to Jen that she's questioned the Queen's taste and challenged her judgment, not a smart move, and this obviously worries Jen. Previously, Jen hinted that she may not want to remain involved in her partnership with Lady Whistledown if her business is put at risk, and she's obviously alarmed when she learns about this development with the Queen. She reminds Penn that it was not part of their agreement, and when Penn argues that Jen knew their arrangement came with risks, Jen replies by saying, yes, but that did not involve the Queen of England. This just makes me wonder if Jen really will get cold feet if Queen Charlotte places a bounty on Lady Whistledown's head.
Yeah.
So maybe Jen in season 3 cuts off their business partnership and apologizes by making Penn a new wardrobe, aware that she needs to find a husband next season. Penn also vows here to make sure that Jen is never revealed as her accomplice, so it could be Penn that ends the relationship next season to protect her if there is a bounty placed on her head.
Yeah, maybe Jen's getting cold feet and Penn goes like, I get that you're not in it now. Yeah. You can take a step back. Because this is how we're going to find her at the beginning of the season where she thinks she has to do everything by herself. And she's kind of accepted that. So she's like, yeah, I'll do the business as well. But I hope they'll still be friends.
Yeah, I think they'll remain friends. I just think, I keep coming back to this, but that printer is in multiple episodes.
Yeah,
I think Penelope is going to be making deliveries again, potentially.
If Colin's going to catch her, then what's he going to do? Catch a bit of fabric? It's not quite hitting the same way. But has Jen got any words of advice for Penn, Bedge?
Yeah, so one of the suggestions she makes is that Penn turns herself in to the Queen. And Penn does say that I cannot be certain that the Queen would believe her, because she says that Queen Charlotte might dismiss her as a friend trying to help a friend. That's if she would even see me at all. Now, do you think the Queen would have believed Penn? Because I love Penn, as you know, so I say this with the greatest of love, but I think the Queen might have believed her. I don't think telling the Queen was necessarily the right approach, but was particularly, as we just said, the impact it could have on Genevieve. But I think maybe it's getting it a bit too real for Penn now, and I appreciate why she would panic and maybe make some of these excuses, but what do we think?
I think that the Queen is pretty convinced that it's Eloise, and to me the only way that they might change her mind is if Eloise came forward with Penn and is like, because I mean, like, you wouldn't throw your friend under the bus, and why would a friend volunteer with you, especially if she's in a lower position in terms of power, and Eloise would need to have taken an interest in this decision.
I think maybe if it wasn't the situation that they're in and Penn just went up and was like, it's me, I think Queen Charlotte would have been more willing to accept it. But with it being so entangled with Eloise, I think she's kind of partially right that Queen Charlotte wouldn't believe her, because for a start, Penn is very aware of how she is perceived or not perceived by society.
There's that too.
But what is she going to say? Like, what proof could she possibly have to the Queen? Because any proof that Penn could offer that it's her, the Queen could just turn around and be like, you've colluded with your best friend, you're covering for your best friend. And I think that Queen Charlotte, we see her personality, she's so one-track minded that when she's on that train, it's going to take something really big to throw off. But I would say that I think Penn's self-preservation makes her really not want to turn herself in. So I think Penn is happy to put this forward that she wouldn't believe. I think she's like, well, the Queen's never going to believe me. I think Penn's interested in looking after herself here as well. Not because she wants to throw Eloise under the bus, but I think if she can find a way to save Eloise and save herself, she'll choose that rather than doing something as final as going and turning herself in.
Yeah, and some Penn naysayers are very vocal about this moment, I think. But we do have to appreciate her situation, the situation her family's been in before, the fear she must be feeling, her loyalty to Jen, and all the stuff we've talked about.
Yeah, but I think the reason she's criticized is the best version of Penelope would have approached Eloise and they would have come up with a really clever solution together or something that they could have printed in Lady Will Sit Down. Her first lie, they could have printed some lie or something to distract or something about Eloise that Eloise would at least approve of and that she'd at least be aware of, and that would make her way more sympathetic in this situation. But there is an element of self-preservation here where she doesn't want to come forward to Eloise. So
it's that micromanaging that Penn's been trying to do the whole season, where she thinks that she can control the whole situation by herself. And as Eloise spirals off more and more, I think Penn tries to tighten the grip, but we've seen last year that her messiest decisions are always when the clock is against her. And because she's good at writing under pressure, she's good at the quick turnaround, and she finds that she likes being clever in that way. But when it's an external force that's putting that pressure on her, she doesn't have time to really think it through. So she has to make a really messy decision. And the reality of the situation is that she doesn't want to tell Eloise. And she's trying to sit there and think, is there any other solution that I can find that doesn't expose myself? I think self-preservation is a huge part of the decision. And I think Eloise is right to be mad at her for it as well. But equally, I don't think there was a perfect solution here. I think she was put into a situation where Eloise negatively contributed to the situation. Penn tried to warn her time and time again, and Elle kept pushing it. And now Penn has to make the difficult decision, which she will make. So what's she going to go for, Veg?
Jen's next suggestion is the burn book tactic from Mean Girls, and I am obsessed with this trope in media. The approach of make up something that you wouldn't say about yourself, which in Mean Girls we get fugly slut.
Is this the fugly slut of Bridgerton?
I like to think that in real life this wouldn't work. Like, she
is a political radical and you cannot trust her.
I think that in real life people would probably stop to think, is this a tactic to divert the attention from the person writing it? But I appreciate in this case it is a bit deeper than Penn calling Eloise a fugly slut. It's a bit of a risk, but I guess from Penn's perspective, it's the best bet.
And I think occasionally people misunderstand what Penelope writes. Penelope doesn't write that she's been with Theo in any kind of romantic capacity. She doesn't expose that she's being caught alone with a boy of working class. She says she's been with political radicals at like rallies and things. It's not the same as exposing her and ruining her virtue, which would be a huge fall from grace from Elle.
Yeah, and during this conversation, Jen remarks that the only thing a lady would never do is wear something she knows makes her look ugly. Now, this seems a bit insensitive.
Jen.
Because Ben does wear
who makes them? Who makes those?
Right, yeah. You make them, you deliver them.
Bold statement, my friend.
But it's possible, though, that maybe this is something Penn takes to heart, and that's why we see her in nicer dresses, like the one this episode. Maybe she picked that out, and next season as well.
And speaking of, just before we leave the Modiste, many Polin fans have also taken an interest in the sketches on the wall here. Some believe that we may see a few of these dress designs in season 3 as part of Penn's new wardrobe. This would be interesting because one or two of the designs appear to be off the shoulder, and though unconfirmed, there is some speculation that Blue Penn at Rest Park is wearing an off-the-shoulder gown.
The way that they drop that conversation is so suspicious to me, because they're talking about scandal and then Penn's like, oh, there's a beautiful dress that you've got on the wall. It's so intentional.
Yes, and the way they end this scene, it's Jen turns to her wall of designs and the frame finally like freezes so you can see all of the designs. It's a little suspicious.
I love the idea that Penn will be her muse for her new designs.
Ooh, and she has like a big reveal when she goes into the ball and she's wearing this fucking amazing dress and everyone's like,
oh, she's gonna look incredible. We need a staircase moment. We're getting a staircase moment here in this episode, but I want the proper shebang.
Yeah.
And with Genevieve's word in her ears reminding her that were you to write something about Miss Eloise, she would never write about herself, Penn heads off. And although Penn insists that she could never ruin her friend, Jen definitely seems to think otherwise. I think she recognises that there's no other option and that Penn is more than capable of doing so. But Penn's got a lot to think about, so let's go to see how she's faring the next day. Lek, I think you're particularly excited about this, though. What's going on?
Okay, so yes, this is probably my favorite sequence in season 2. I just loved everything that happens from the moment Penn appears in the doorway of the room where Colin and Cousin Jack are talking to Colin happily strutting out of the Featherington house a few minutes later. It's just perfection. But to dig a little deeper, we start off with a shot of Penn writing at her desk. She's obviously distressed, not sure what, if anything, to write. But then we see this gorgeous shot of her from behind. Her desk is positioned right in front of this sunny window, but Penn seems to be further back in the shadows, which we kind of know are significant next season. But it's just a beautiful beautiful, beautiful shot.
And she is in the famous Daisy Penn Daisy dress.
Oh, yeah, the Daisy dress is cute.
We love it in the fandom. It's Lecky's favourite.
Yep.
It's a fan favourite. It was runner-up in the subreddit outfit voting game, and it's up there for the rest of us too, I think. Yeah, it's cute. So this was also used as Penn's promo image for season 2, this dress. So where she's sort of leaning, looking sneaky, it was this dress. So I think we can safely assume that at least someone in the production team also had this dress as their favourite because they picked it. There's also, there's a cosplayer on YouTube called Kiralee Cosplay who has a really nice video where she like recreates this dress herself. It's so good. We'll link in the show notes. And what she says at the start of the video resonated. She says, occasionally in a cosplayer's life, they will come across an image. This image will be a single promo image that ignites a fire within their heart. The need to create it will take over their every waking moment. And I think a lot of us think about this dress a lot. It's just so bright, gorgeous.
Yes.
And it's a shame that yellow is seen as, you know, something that Penn doesn't particularly like wearing. Because this is great. It's just lovely.
I'm really going to miss her not being in yellow next season.
Same.
Yeah. And for spring as well, yellow for spring. It's a really nice dress. It fits her really well, fairly well for a day dress. It's just so great. And her hair and makeup are gorgeous too. Her hair is sleek, sort of to one side, but it's loose. She's got lightly blushed cheeks and lips, and she looks like quite grown up, but sweet and pretty. And I don't want to take all the gushing away from Lecky, but just I love it as well.
I agonise over the decision, but now I've thought about it, I think this is my favourite Penn look ever. I think the intricate curling of her hair, but it's so elegant still. What I love most about this is that it's so Penelope. It's like the archetypal Penn. It's her in her yellow, but she looks so radiant. She looks like sunshine.
Yes, exactly.
I'd argue the green dress.
The green dress is also very cute.
Oh, you like the green dress, do you? You'll have a great time in season 3 then. I'm so happy for you, Beans. And we'll be there crying because she's in fucking blue and silver and all these beautiful dresses, and we'll be sat there like,
Seeing the yellow.
actually, no, I think about it. I actually miss my yellow pen and my baby blue Colin.
That's my Stockholm syndrome.
But as beautiful, as darling, as sunshiny radiant as Penn looks, she is struggling to write. So she decides to take a little stroll through her house to clear her writers / how to efficiently ruin your best friend's block. And who happens to be there in the house? Mr. Colin Bridgerton. Funny how that happens. Honest to God, I am so used to seeing this boy in this house. How often is he in the bloody Featherington residence? He was there all of last season. He never leaves, which is surely just a complete coincidence, as things so often seem to be in his sweet little life. But he's there chatting with Jack about his travels and his mind. He's there on business. He's trying to get in on the Ruby investment.
I wrote this down in my initial notes, but I can't remember the exact line of dialogue here. But Cousin Jack is talking about, like, I think how he found the mines while hunting or something like that.
It's like on a hunting expedition or something.
Yes, and I feel like this might be also where potentially Colin starts to get a little sus, but who knows.
Had I not gone on to that hunting expedition, I never would have just... Yeah, because you always go on a hunting expedition and just find a ruby mine, don't you?
And we get a glimpse of one of my favorite Colins, Compass Colin. As per usual, Colin immediately seems to sense Penn's presence and turns toward her, declaring, "Oh, the lady of the hour," and she greets him with this lovely, radiant smile.
And she is absolutely beaming at what he just said. You know, she's true sunshine throughout this whole scene, but you do kind of understand where she gets these ideas from about him, don't you? When he's saying things like that in front of her guardian as well.
Yes.
Yep.
But Colin happily explains that he was just telling Lord Featherington that his interest in the mines was sparked quite naturally when he viewed that exquisite necklace that Penn wore to his brother's wedding. And he happily says that right in front of her legal guardian.
Yes.
You've been looking at what, Colin? Penn is similarly surprised and says,
Was it? Was it really me?
Was it really my bosom?
Was it really my necklace that you were looking at, Colin?
My heaving bosom.
Goodness.
So after Penelope confirms that Colin has just admitted that he's been staring at her boo rubies in front of basically her guardian, Colin lets out this little satisfied hum that I just find hilarious. He's like, hum.
she's almost like, is that really what you're saying, Colin?
And he doubles
right
down.
here in front of Jack. And he's like, yep. Absolutely. Great rubies. 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Yeah.
Yep.
It wasn't the necklace, was it? Because as we remember, the necklace was freaking tiny.
Tiny.
Yeah.
No, it was blinding. It was...
Tiny little rubies.
He must have been really paying close attention to admire them to their full potential. No, he was checking her out, and he's not even remotely apologetic about the fact. Book fans, you were all very, very well acquainted with Colin's strong emotions towards Penn's necklaces. God bless book to screen adaptations, eh? But back to business. Jack says that Colin has made a compelling case, and we'll get back to him. You know, Colin's eagerly awaiting a response because he only wishes to be dazzled by Jack's exploits like the rest of the ton. Well, Colin, you've definitely been dazzled by something, sweetheart, but I don't think it's Jack's exploits.
And if you thought Penn looked radiant before, she basically lights up like the sun when Colin then asks her to walk him downstairs, letting out this
Gorgeously shot.
adorably awkward breath. The sequence that follows is one of my favorite Polin moments ever, as I've said. I love how Penn gazes at Colin as they walk downstairs and make their way to the door. She's just so in love with him, and she's just so tuned in to what he's saying because she just hangs on his every word.
Like you say, she stays entirely focused on his eyes. She never strays, which stresses me out a tiny bit because...
Yeah, couldn't be me. I'd fall down the fucking stairs.
Please watch where you're going.
Yeah.
But I think it is a gorgeous way to show how utterly besotted she is with him. Whenever I watch this scene, I think it represents how Penn has yet to see Colin in a sexual capacity. Because if you watch Nicola carefully, she always keeps Penelope's eyes trained right on his, and it feels like she's trying to look right into his soul because she's so dearly besotted with him. But I actually can't think of any time she's looked at him anywhere else, beyond maybe that one time when she said he looked distinguished when he came back with his lovely little beard.
Pre-pirate outfit.
Pre-pirate indeed. And I'd argue that so far, any sexualised gaze between them has only ever come from Colin, a la, you know, our beloved What a Barb, and the exquisite necklace. But I think the truth is that they both still need to have their sexual awakening. Kudos if Penn's sexual awakening kicks in the second she spots Pirate Colin, because that would mean she's super pissed off at him and super het off at the sight of him, which is the most delicious combination, if you ask me. And when it comes to Colin, I think although we've seen maybe tiny little sparks here and there, I think he's still got to go on that journey too, and we must simply hope and pray that his sexual awakening hasn't happened in Spain, Italy and France, because oh my god. But because we're truly the most cursed fandom, I have no doubt that sex montage is coming. No pun intended. A little bit intended.
No.
The
only montage we're going to get is him shopping for little charms.
Little charm necklace.
He makes his little...
Sleeping with people on a night and then wondering...
No, I can't abide this. No.
Optimist there, Licky. And as they walk down the stairs together, it's this gorgeously domestic moment. Colin just so happens to fit in perfectly well at the Featherington residence. And the two comfortably discuss Colin's interest in investment. It's news to Penn that Colin had such an interest, and like many things in Colin's life, it's news to him too. And he says, it's a chance to make a name for myself as your cousin has done, and once our profits come, both our families will benefit, which is just what makes it so enticing. Trust Colin to find a way to make his purpose that is directly tied into the Featheringtons. And even Penn is kind of surprised, but Colin confirms that he's not in the habit of consorting with those he holds in low esteem. And as we'll see next week, he really believes that the Featheringtons were a fine family. That's all there is to it. He's just a fan of the Featheringtons. He's like you, Beans. He's a Portia fan. What can we say?
Hell yeah, that's the way to be.
And if Penn just so happens to be at the centre of his entire life plans for the future, what a lovely coincidence it will be. And they have this gorgeous exchange between the two of them where Penn stops and says that she never really thought of it like that. And Colin, I love him, he's like, I understand, Penn. I understand everything about our relationship. Let me just spell it out to you, honey. He's like, our relationship has taken place so naturally over the years, one could take it for granted. He's like, not me, but someone could. Now, fortunately, I'm very aware of this, so you're never going to catch that from me. Oh, I love how he is in the scene. And that phrase that he says, our relationship has taken place
Colin.
so naturally. Don't you mean friendship? Is that not the word you were looking for, my love? What made you say relationship? What on earth is going on in his head? Talk about a Freudian slip.
Yeah.
He pats himself on the back. Never takes it for granted, perfectly narrating everything he's been doing for the past 12 years, or whatever it ends up being.
And will continue to do next episode. But really, this is just another great moment of Polin miscommunication here, but it does give us some insight into Colin's perception of Penn and their, quote, relationship. Colin says that the relationship has taken shape so naturally, which almost suggests that this situation with and his feelings for Penn are creeping up on him so slowly and effortlessly that he ironically doesn't realize it's more than friendship. Deep down, his subconscious seems to suspect this and tries to verbalize the issue here, here.
Yeah.
But because the relationship has taken shape so effortlessly over the years, that is precisely why it's so hard for him to recognize.
But then we get that beautiful line, "You've always been so constant and loyal, Penn," which really sums up a lot of what Penelope has meant to Colin, especially that constancy that she's always provided to his life, that cornerstone that's going to crumble.
Last episode, Veg stated that the way Colin said Penn's name during the purpose scene was her favorite. Now this, I would personally argue, the way he says her name in this conversation, in my opinion, is way better. It's just a personal choice. It's just so soft and lovely.
It's a good one.
And although we're flying high at Colin's words, Penn actually isn't. She's a little bit troubled by what he said. She says that, "I do not believe I deserve such praise for my loyalty." Clearly, Eloise is weighing heavily on her mind, and she can't quite meet his gaze in that moment.
Colin, yeah, definitely takes note of the fact that Penn seems troubled.
Mm-hmm. We have said he is very perceptive. He might not be perceptive that Penn loves him, but he's very tuned to her in this moment where he realises that there's something wrong. But I think he doesn't really want to push her too much. And even though she's just told him that she shouldn't be praised for her loyalty, he breezes right back on past it and calls upon her that loyalty to not tell anyone, because he doesn't want it to get back to Anthony. And he says, especially Eloise, hinting not only at obviously the friendship, but his suspicion that his sister is the writer and that in a roundabout way could end up publishing about Colin's plans in Lady Whistledown. And Colin also says, "I know there are no secrets between you two." And we saw this in 205, that he understands that they have secrets and that Penn doesn't tell him everything. And at this point, I think he definitely suspects that Penn knows that Elle is Lady Whistledown, if we're going down this theory anyway. And I think that's why he's made it such a point for her not to tell Eloise. And I love so much about this scene, but I think it really represents how far these two have come over the whole season, to the point where Colin is comfortable sharing his interests, his intentions, but to also confide in her and to also trust that she'll protect his interests and extend that loyalty to him.
You know what? This is a nice scene. And I know that Colin...
I feel like there's a bit coming.
Right. So, in my defence, last week I was particularly cross and I went a bit too far with my rant. So, listeners, I do think Colin is a nice man, and I think his main fault is just obliviousness, which I'm super excited to see him get over that in Series 3, and I will keep this quick. But
what you can't see is that was a written statement that we forced her to read aloud throughout kicking her off the podcast.
So I think I really am with Penn in this scene, because what is she going to take out of this interaction? I'm an expert on clowning. I thought at one point my boyfriend was shopping for engagement rings. Turns out he was being sneaky because he was like looking at skincare stuff, and he wasn't anywhere near that. I am 100% with Penn. She thinks, we touched on this earlier a little bit, but this is 100%. She thinks that he has come round. I know he's talked about the minds things, but she thinks he is coming round to get favour with the man of the house, cousin Jack Harrington. This is him. It's the step before asking for her hand. I'm convinced that is what she thought. He said all that shit to her last episode, which she probably thinks that was him sort of telling her he's courting her, and then now this, and then next episode from her perspective, when he takes her into that room, that's going to be it. He's going to seal the deal. And that is, I promise, that is exactly what's going through her head. And it winds me up. It must be so hard because everything's so proper in the 1800s. No one knows what means what. Like, as far as, you know, this is season 3 is going to be the season she thought she was having this season. And it's because of that. And he literally says there's benefits of both of their families. That our relationship has taken shape. Like, what does that mean? Why would you say that if you don't have intentions? Gosh, I don't know why he's so clueless. And boys are very dumb, and that's all I'll say. I've kept it very sweet, and I hope you're proud of me.
Like, do you want to say anything?
Oh, I mean, like, I'm with Colin in this scene. He doesn't know that Penn has feelings for him, or that he's accidentally kind of leading her along. And, like, obviously I feel sorry for Penelope, but I mean, it's not their time yet. They're just on different wavelengths. But I feel like everything about this scene, it's the suggestion of what is to come. There's so much promise here that I can't help but love this scene, because Colin is starting, I think, to fall for Penelope here. And although Penelope thinks he's farther along than he is, she's at the last chapter. He's on chapter 1, but we're getting there.
I don't know that she thinks that he's that close to being with her. I think she thinks that they're on that path. And everything he does gives her these really complicated signals. And the important thing to remember is it's entirely unintentional on Colin's part.
Yeah.
People do wonder if he knows that Penn likes him. And we've said it before, it's really important that he doesn't know. Because if he was walking into her house saying things like, our relationship, I want our families to be connected, I'm trying to do this to benefit us both, it would be cruel.
Yeah.
But the reason he's doing it is because he's falling in love with her. So in that way, it's very sweet. But but Penn does get hurt by it. And I don't think we can avoid that, is that Penn reads into it too much on her own part, but also because of the mixed signals that Colin is giving her. And I think it's just super confusing. And it's something that I think it's one of the reasons she really needs to redefine their boundaries next year, because I think after being burnt so severely, because this is what, and we'll get into it more next episode, right? But what happens at the end of 208 is devastating. But I always feel bad for Colin because it erases everything else that their friendship ever was. And I don't think any of that was a lie. He just made a mistake at the end of 208.
Yeah.
And so I think all of this is true, but Penelope is going to take 208 as a way to be like, oh, everything I thought was completely wrong.
Right.
And I don't think that, and I think there's truth in all of this. But I think Colin would be devastated if he realised how it all came across.
I think there's just some negligence here. Like, he needs to be aware, I'm a boy, she's a girl, like, I have to be careful what I say.
He's very careless with her.
Yeah,
He's very careless with her. And whether that's because he feels so comfortable with her that he lets his guard down. But the truth is they still live in the society they live in, and he should know better than to be like this.
Yeah.
But he just gets so caught up in her. I do love him though, and I will defend him to the end.
Sadly, my favorite scene is cruelly interrupted by Portia coming down the stairs, declaring that she didn't know they had callers today. Penn and Colin spring apart in a way that seems weirdly guilty, but let's just brush past that and move on to the big question here. Does Portia know that something is going on between Penn and Colin, even if she thinks it's one-sided? It probably doesn't help that Colin remarks that he's been telling Penn things that he'd blush to tell anyone else as he takes his leave.
This is where I'm with you, Veg, I'm sorry.
And in the next scene, Portia asks Jack to not swindle Colin, basically. So you could read that as Portia recognizing that there is something between them. Ooh. But a part of me just really wants Portia to be surprised next season when she finds out that Penn and Colin are an item. But it's possible she senses that something is weird here, especially because they spring apart like that.
I think a lot of us want that scene, right? A lot of people have mentioned in DMs to us they want the scene with Portia and the thinking that he wants to marry Felicity, or I guess Prudence in this case.
I think she doesn't suspect anything. I think the way that it's cut, the next scene where she's immediately talking to Jack about the Ruby scheme, just really shows that that's her main motivation.
Yeah.
And Jack says he's trying to persuade Colin, but he's strangely persistent. And then Portia's like, yeah, of course he's really fixed on this. His family are completely fucked. Make no wonder he's trying to get in there now. What's interesting there is Portia is completely misreading Colin's motivations. Colin has told us as the audience what his reasoning was. It's this: he wants to find his purpose and he wants to help the Featheringtons and, you know, Penelope. But Portia thinks his motivation is because of the scandal. So I think she's completely misreading what's going on.
I've always read this scene as Portia telling cousin Jack not to take Colin's money. Do you read it differently? Because I feel like it's not because of Penn, though. I think it's because I think it's because of the Bridgertons and how much she doesn't want the Bridgertons, I think, to, you know, fall too much.
Yeah.
There's a bit last episode where Jack is asking, oh, who can't we swindle then? And she's like, the Bridgertons. And he says something along the lines of, is that affection I hear? And she brushes it off. She's like, no, it's not affection. I don't get affection about families.
Yeah.
I think she has an affection for the Bridgertons, but I
think so too.
I just don't know that she suspects.
And I think, she only gives that up later this episode when she realizes their relationship has maybe been tarnished a little too much.
Yeah. Maybe she realizes that Penn has an affection and a connection because she knows that she's best friends with Eloise.
Yeah.
But, and, you know, although Lecky brushed past it, I remain entirely obsessed with how the two of them spring apart and how Colin looks terrified momentarily in Portia's presence. And the way he recovers that is astonishing when he starts talking nonsense about telling Penn all of his secrets, things that would make him blush to share with anyone else. Like, what the hell does Portia think that means? But to cycle back to what we were saying, I love like that grin that Penn gives Portia. She's like, take that, Catherine the Great. I told you we were friends.
Yes.
And then Colin happily skips on out of Featherington House like, oh, you know, the successful chat with my bestie.
Yep.
You know, and there's that warm feeling in his chest and the world feels particularly magical and everything is bright and perfect after chatting with Penn. You know, and then he concludes it's just because, you know, it's a nice day that day. But I think it makes Portia think, is what I'd say about that scene. It makes Portia maybe think that she's underestimated Penn in her connection to the Bridgertons.
Yeah.
Or maybe she suspects that Penn has a soft spot for Colin, but I don't think she thinks that Colin returns it. Although after that conversation, he fucking knows. Because what the hell has he been telling her that would make him blush?
Yes. So later that day, Elle panics when she realizes that Lady Whistledown has not yet published. Just then, Penelope struts into the room and adorably greets the family, saying, "Good day, Bridgertons," before Elle drags her to her room upstairs.
Yeah, this is walking in completely unannounced. Well, she announces herself like she did earlier. It's great. Love it.
I'm here, bitches. Yeah, let's not dwell on the fact that literally no one else acknowledges her presence.
Colin isn't there, to be fair.
Ben does look at her, which, is something. But Elle drags her up to her room, and Penn looks quite sweetly intrigued as they run through the corridor, but it's all going to go wrong.
Yeah, I think she's sort of just reeling from the latest interaction with Colin, but she maybe should be more sensitive to the whole deal with Eloise.
Elle's plight.
Yeah, she's like flying high after her interaction with Colin, doesn't she?
Yeah.
I think she came straight on over.
A little outfit point. So she's added to her dress a little heart bag, and I don't know, like she's on cloud nine. She's had this thing with Colin, and now she's wearing a little heart bag. I just can't help but think that might be a little metaphor. And all the flowers as well. Is that something to do with like their love blooming or something?
Oh.
Maybe I'm just clowning. But
Certainly is in Penn's head.
I love reading into the outfits. Yeah.
What else are we going to do for the next 8 months? But Penn's face drops when Eloise says that she's going to confess to being Lady Whistledown. She's kind of shocked at first, but then she gets really angry at Eloise's plan to impersonate Whistledown, especially at the mention of Theo, who's been the bane of her existence all season. And Penn begs Elle not to do anything rash, but Eloise is motivated by protecting her family, and she knows that there's no time left. And then Penn says, "You cannot continue lying like that," which is oddly prophetic. Pot calling the kettle black there, Penn. But then Eloise says something which absolutely stabs Penn through the heart. She says, "I no longer care what the real Lady Whistledown does or does not decide to do. She is dead to me." And you see that really cuts deep with Penn, and she visibly flinches. All season, she's been trying to get Eloise's adoration of Lady Whistledown back, and this is how it's turned out.
I think Nicola maybe asked, I might be getting this wrong, but I think Nicola asked about that line. I think she didn't want to say that. And the writer said like, "Oh no, you've got to say that line." And they were like, "Uh-oh, there's a fallout coming."
Oh.
But a little detail I noticed during this rewatch is that the telescope, which we previously pointed out and was pointed at the Featherington house, has been tilted up in this scene. This could be a visual reminder that Elle has given up the search for Lady Whistledown, or a clue that she no longer needs to keep looking because the answer may soon fall into her lap.
Because it was looking across the Featherington household before when she was on her search, and now it's heavenwards almost, and she's just said that Lady Whistledown is dead to her. So it's looking up to the heavens.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Elle calls Penn loyal here, thanking her for being such a loyal friend.
Word of the day.
This is the third time Penn has been called loyal this episode. Colin uses the word twice in their earlier chat, and we can just see that Penn just feels so burdened and guilty as the two friends embrace.
She is loyal, though.
Yeah, but I mean, she's feeling guilty here.
This is the thing, right? It comes from ultimate loyalty, doesn't it? But she feels burdened by it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just love how whenever they say something nice to her, it's like when Colin was like, "You really are very good, you know that?"
Yeah.
And Penn was just like, "For fuck's sake." It's like that here with the loyalty thing. It's like, that doesn't make me feel any better, guys. But if that's not going to cheer the mood up, then maybe a nice ball will. Because over at the Bridgerton household, we're all going to get ready to go to Violet's Harmony Ball. A successful endeavour, I'm sure.
And because Colin has not yet figured out his feelings for a certain redhead, he instead fingers some tassels as he makes his entrance into the ballroom. Apologies to the cast and crew, and especially Luke Newton, but that joke popped into my head last week and I just couldn't resist. But in Colin's defense, he could be thinking about the biscuit cushion here, which also has tassels, so perhaps they bring him comfort.
Yeah, so Colin is dressed in his finery look, like we've seen similar throughout this series. Black suit, creamy waistcoat, creamy cravat. We've seen a lot of this look lately, but he's not the lead, so he hasn't got a reason to wear anything completely stand out. But I'm excited to see his formal looks in season 3. We've discussed what Penn's going to wear, but, what about Colin? Justice for Colin.
Oh, I'm sure he'll look lovely.
And also, this is not Polin, but I want to point out what is probably my favourite dress on anyone in the whole show. It's this dress that Violet wears. Like, the colour of this dress is a balm to my eyes. I love it so much. It's like a light blue, posy colour. It's just amazing.
The whole palette of this is gorgeous, with the massive bee in the middle of the floor. Edmund's there, bless.
Is there a bee on the floor? I didn't notice.
Oh, god damn it. Did you say Edmund's there?
Oh, you're on the floor that they paint.
Oh.
It's a fucking bee.
Why did they do that? Yeah. I love this dress. Also, random other point, I love the way Lady Danbury says Bridgerton in this scene. She's like, Bridgerton. And I'm hoping for a few Colin Bridgertons next season.
Bridgerton. Oh, I love this whole dance. We can't go into it too much because we're a Polin podcast, but this whole dance is just one of my favourite scenes in the whole show.
Yeah, it's cute.
It's just gorgeous. The way Anthony with Hyacinth just makes my heart burst.
But a wonderful Halloween edit would be putting some creepy music over it from Midsummer and making it seem like they're actually in a cult.
Lucky, there you go, Mr. Jobby.
And we get some lovely Colin moments throughout the ball. My favorite, however, is his dance with Elle. In the background, you can make out Elle leaping into Colin's arms during the dance, and then he spins her around, which is super cute.
Yeah. This is one of my all-time favourite Colin moments. Originally, I thought it was Benedict because they switch partners and it's kind of hard to keep track of them.
Yeah.
For a long time, I watched it and thought it was Benedict and Elle, and I was like, oh, that's so beautiful to their relationship. And then I realised it was Colin, and it just made my heart absolutely burst open because they love each other so deeply.
Yeah.
They usually show that by like their really bitey relationship, but there's such a deep bond between the two of them that I really hope we see next season. And speaking of cute dances, if you remember in 108, Violet talked about how the last time she ever danced at a ball was with Edmund. So it's really sweet that the next time she dances is here with all of her children. I mean, except Fran. Don't know where she's fucked off to again. Sorry, Fran.
But as you just said, there's a bee on the floor, so Edmund's kind of there with them in spirit. Very sweet.
So they're trampling all over his spirit. Yeah, it's beautiful. Honestly, the morbid Bridgerton way of coping with death will never get old to me. But then the dance wraps up. The mood slightly sours, but Colin's in high spirits. And why exactly is that, Veg?
Because there is food to be eaten.
He's like, food for an entire ball's worth of people? No problem.
Yeah, I think because he has a line about going to start on the food, and I think maybe they weren't sure who they were going to give that line to, and after he started peppering in the foodie moments, they were like, we'll give it to Colin.
I love how Hyacinth starts going towards the food, and if you watch it, Colin like barrels straight past her and almost like throws her out of the way. He's like, fucking get near my food. I love him.
As Colin shockingly slips away to sample the food, the next issue of Lady Whistledown is finally delivered.
Uh-oh.
And in the issue, Lady Whistledown notes that Elle may have acted rashly in haste, kind of softening the blow that she lands a bit here, but the damage is done.
It is indeed. Eloise has been exposed. And if you watch, as Colin is busy munching his food, he looks at Elle in a very strange way, which adds to my suspicions that he thinks that she's done this. And as Anthony storms out of the room, we catch a glimpse of a very worried Colin behind him. But I still think he's eating if you watch really carefully. He's one of those people who like never loses his appetite even when he's stressed.
Back over at the Featherington house, Pickles are feeling tickled once more as a gleeful Portia informs Cousin Jack that their neighbors are to remain afflicted for quite some time, suggesting that he reverse course and seal the agreement with Colin as his family's reputation now appears to be in shambles.
Meanwhile, we get an intercut of a distraught Penn who was agonising over writing that edition. She's distraught at what she's done and she snaps her quill in half. She's stopped writing, something that she will not resume until the end of 208 when she, loses everyone she loves. But for now, she's committed to the bit,
Yeah, she's sad.
It's all
Poor Penelope. I mean, it barely seems worth mentioning the outfit because it's such a deep scene, but, she's got a nice little dressing gown and her hair is loose. Shame about the context, and it does show that she is genuinely very torn up about this.
She can still look hot while she looks torn up.
Yeah.
There's no law against that. Sad but beautiful. It's always the way with Penn. I once made a graph breaking down all the reasons Penn has cried and trying to figure out how much that was. Do you remember this? I tried to figure out the percentage of tears that Colin had caused her. And I forget the statistics now, but it's almost always involves someone with the surname Bridgerton. I think maybe one time she half cried over her dad, but the rest were Colin or Elle. As Lecky said, Whistledown has exposed Eloise as being involved with political radicals, but we will see the repercussions of this fully next week because...
For she's apparently been associating unchaperoned with improper company. Political radicals, in fact.
Lady Whistledown refers to Eloise's scandal as a betrayal to the Bridgerton family, but I think we know exactly which betrayal Penn is really referring to.
Whatever the case may be, we must all remember, as one makes one's bed, so one must lie in it.
Also pointing out that Penn's in her dressing gown when this line is delivered.
Yeah, true. Thematic.
Oh, Penn. Cheerful one. So speaking of cheerful moments, Lecky, have you got whistle up for this episode?
So it's every single interaction between Penn and Colin during his visit at the Featherington house. They are adorably awkward, and you can just sense the connection between them is deepening and becoming something new and even more meaningful.
On a track to success, that one. What about Whistledown for the episode?
To be honest, I really struggled to come up with one for this episode. Even the stilted promenade glances are great in my opinion, so I'd have to go with all of the conflict between Kate and Edwina in this episode is kind of a bummer.
Your main character was just sobbing on the floor. I don't know what you want.
Yeah, but she'll get over
Reach
it.
isn't affected by that.
She'll be happy next
Oh,
season.
will she?
Yeah, but she wasn't falling off a horse and getting a concussion.
If you don't care about Penn, then fair enough. You and Veg can go form your other podcast with all your other
I do care about Penn. I just know that
characters.
she and Eloise, they will heal, and that she and Colin will come together.
Oh, they will do that. They will do that indeed. What's up with Bo rating then for this one? Lecky, what are you giving this? Because you do love it so much.
I would probably give this a 3, I think.
A 3. Okay, not your best, but not your worst.
I mean, just because there is... The promenade glances are kind of about Marina in the past.
Yeah.
Bummer to be reminded of their past. And Penn is upset at the end, like you said. But it's just, there's so much promise here for the future. Love this episode.
Veg, how are you feeling?
I feel okay about it. Like, lots of ups and downs for Penn, but with more bows being worse, I guess, yeah, like 3 or 4.
Yeah, I'm going to go for a 3 as well.
Yay.
I think the staircase scene is just so beautiful between the two of them, and it's just chaotic, and it just builds up so well. It puts Penelope in the exact right headspace for Colin next episode for it to really, really cut. And that's a horrible thing to say, but it leaves her with their relationship in a way that she's really on that track that you were talking about, Veg.
Beans, what are your thoughts on the
I give it a 2.
Yay!
Are you pipping this to the post?
Yeah, I give it a 2. It's a nice meaty episode. It's got a good amount of drama outside of like Penn and Eloise too.
A lot of drama, yep.
Do you love the drama?
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, talking about drama, next week, can you believe it? We're going to be doing the season finale, our final rewatch. Until season 3.
Yeah.
If it ever comes out.
I think it's safe to say we didn't think we'd be in this position at this time.
No.
Yeah, we thought we were going to be racing to get this done in time for season 3.
Yeah.
But
We thought we were going to have to be like,
Whoops.
God, how will we fit it all in with all the promos that we're going to have to cover? But we're going to go out with a bang next week. It's a huge episode and we cannot wait. We're so excited. So please join us next week. We can't wait to hear all your thoughts on this episode and next week's. But in the meantime, where can everyone find us, Lecky?
you can find us at WhatABarbPod on Instagram and TikTok.
And you can find us on reddit.com/r/Polin Bridgerton.
Until then, see us out, beans.
Das violin. Do 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 do.